a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love
No,
your Blu-ray collection as well, by the way. It's
thank
great.
you, thank you very much. I was a product of the Blockbuster generation. I worked there for 5 years. Best job I've ever
Wow.
had, probably best job I ever will have. So that's where it all sort of began. Are you a physical media guy? You enjoy? Do you have any
Yeah, I
collections yourself?
am. Yeah, and we actually, I used to live a little bit further away down by the beach, and there was this like old school video store that hung around for about 5 or 10 years after everything else had fell, and we used to just go there all the time.
Yeah,
And then eventually that ended up falling, and we just went in there, and I just took a lot of my favorite films, the Blu-ray versions, and now I have like a stacked near my TV. You know,
that's
it's actually interesting. I put on Tropic Thunder on my Blu-ray
oh, yeah,
version
yeah.
of it. I put it on the other night, and I totally forgot that it was an extended edition, and there were scenes that I had like literally forgot about that existed, and it was an incredible like watch. I was just like, what's happening right now?
It's such a good experience. Like that Tropic Thunder lives in that collection as well. I love that movie, but I think like the idea of the extended cut and the director's cut and all this stuff is so exciting, and you just don't get that on streaming, man. Like it's just not one of those
Oh,
things.
even director's commentaries, like I miss that, or
Yeah,
the special features behind the scenes. Like there was I remember I used to just whenever I'd get a Blu-ray, I would struggle not to watch the special like behind the scenes before I'd even watch the film.
100%.
I'd be so much more excited about seeing how they created. I mean, it's on YouTube now, and there's a lot of
Sure.
stuff on there, but the audio commentary I miss.
It's I know what you mean. It's just not the same when you don't like you get to actively like choose it to watch. Like you press special features and you go into it's just an experience. Have you ever got to do director's commentary for either this or Till Death?
No, no, I haven't. And one day, one day I'd
That'd
love
be
to do
awesome.
it just to tick that box. I don't know if anyone would want to listen to me, talk for 100 minutes, but I'd love to do it for my own sake.
That would be awesome. That'd be awesome. Well, I'd definitely listen, man. I'd definitely listen if that was the case. But I obviously I'd love to crack into Subservience, and I kind of want to, I guess, get started with, I guess, sort of more of an obvious question in regards to working with Megan Fox again, because obviously she's fantastic in Till Death. I love that movie, and she's really great in this as well. I'm curious to know at what point she came on board. What point when you were involved in this film did you kind of realize that Megan was that perfect Alice for you?
It was pretty late in the prep because I was overseas, we were building sets and we were kind of moving forward and having discussions. And I think I was slightly hesitant just because I had done a movie with her once before, and
Sure.
I was like, do I want to be, doing every movie? Do I become the Megan Fox guy if I do this? And so there was a slight hesitation, but the moment I really started to think about it, and having worked with her once before, I thought about the strength that she could bring to this role. I thought this reminded me a lot of Jennifer's Body and the way the character arc kind of, goes down into a darker territory. And ultimately, because of the intimate scenes, I thought, well, we've built this trust from one film.
Sure.
We can kind of take that and we can go in, and having that trust there, I think just helped create a much safer space, and a space that we all felt that we could, explore in.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it comes across like that on screen because, like, like the character of Alice, not only just the intimate scenes, but there's a lot of violent moments too, and you've already been through all of that as well with Till Death, having to work through these intense moments together. So that relationship kind of it really comes across on screen. I'd love
I
to
think she
sort
was
of,
more
oh yeah,
excited with this one. Just to touch on that, I think she was more
yeah,
excited to be the one, doing the violence in this
yeah.
one, to having
Having it
the
done
violence
to her.
done to her and the blood all over her and everything. I think this was a much more fun experience for her.
A nice change of pace, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to talk about sort of your visual choices as a director too, because I love that you have this dystopian feeling, but it's in this present day setting. We don't have the tall white building and what we kind of are accustomed to know as like a futuristic setting. So I'm curious to know sort of what decision process went behind that in having that dystopian feel, but in a setting that we kind of know and we live in today.
Yeah, I think sitting down with our production designer, Alexei, we had discussions and everything, and as soon as you see, think of sci-fi genre, you are starting to kind of go wild with your imagination. But I really wanted it to feel grounded,
Mm,
and as a result, we are kind of going through this transition of AI right now. So I wanted it to feel like this is happening now, In the same way that when smartphones came along, like it wasn't like every other technology just suddenly boosted. It was like suddenly everyone just had smartphones.
Sure.
And so I thought of that about that with The Sims. And I think a big inspiration actually was Inception, in the way that that is a sci-fi film, but it doesn't feel like, it feels like it's set in present time, that it could be, just around the corner happening. So I think that vibe is what I really wanted to go for. And I thought by keeping it grounded, created a much more, I would say, higher stakes, but also more of a, I think it helps with the intimate lens of the family, making it feel more real and feel more emotional and raw. I
Mm.
think the further we kind of pushed it away and just, we explored different elements. We had a concept artist come in and we played with different things, but I was just worried that we were going to disconnect ourselves too much from this.
Mm.
So to me, it was just keeping it grounded.
I think that grounded feeling occurs outside of the setting as well, and I think a big part of that is Megan as Alice, as this sim, right? And I'm curious to know with whether it was the design of her as a sim or the conversations you had with Megan, what were some of the unique challenges you faced in giving a robot humanistic tendencies, and then on the other hand, making a robot feel, sorry, making a human sort of have more of a robotic nature to them? What were those conversations, and what was that evolution like?
Yeah, well, it was kind of the make it or break it element for me for the concept, because
Sure.
if she goes too robotic, if she goes too emotionless and everything, when we get to those intimate scenes, they will crumble. They
Sure.
will feel weird and odd.
Mm.
But at the same time, you kind of want to push the envelope as far as it can go, and you're kind of testing the waters along the way. So I remember very early on us having a discussion about that, and her physicality being wanting to be like a ballerina. She really wanted to keep her posture, upright. Everything was kind of smooth and very precise with her motion. And I think that just influenced everything, the way she was speaking and the way she would, just do any sort of movement. And so taking that element, and it was kind of like, well, this is our bar here. Now every other sim within this movie has to kind of have some degree of that. And we were
Sure.
slowly pulling it away. As you get to the bartenders, they're a little bit less. And then by the time you get to the construction workers, we kind of really pull away from it. Or the surgeons, which is one of my favorite
Mm.
scenes we got to do. Um, so yeah, it was really trying to find where that level was, because knowing as we were getting to the intimate scenes, I wanted to just add a little bit of emotion here and there. And
Mm.
one of the particular moments for that for me was the Casablanca scene, and kind of creating
Yeah.
this, like planting a seed that was going to unravel everything from that point on.
Mm. I like obviously just based on the chat we're having now, I can tell you're a movie lover and that inspiration of movie comes through. And that Casablanca scene, actually, I love the quote in that where he says, "Movies is something you have to experience to feel it." And I feel like that, that's so important as a movie lover and a movie watcher. So I'm curious to know what that experience was like for you. What was a movie you watched where that first time you went, "Oh, I'm not just watching something, I'm experiencing it. I'm feeling it right now." A formative one for you.
I mean, there's the classics of like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park that like are so influential to you as a child. Then there's the kind of horror elements of like Saving Private Ryan, where you're like experiencing that opening
Yeah.
scene, and it's so visceral, it's so violent, and like I would have been just around 9 when it came out, so I would have probably seen it on DVD or something at home. I don't think I
Sure.
was at the cinemas to watch that one. But yeah, I remember like the sound design and everything really pulling you in and just really, hitting it home. Um, but yeah, I mean, like there are so many films along the way. I mean, even all the way up to something like Gravity, which I thought was such a simple plot, but
Yeah.
I watched it at IMAX and it just brought you in a way that I hadn't felt before. And, it's those moments where you feel like you get lost in the movie, especially as, you become more surrounded by films, whether it's in the film industry or just loving it. I think it's harder to find films that really, grab you by the throat in that way. So when it does happen, you get so excited.
I love it. And I just love that you added that scene in the movie because I feel like for movie lovers, it's like that we speak that language, right? I remember when I saw Gravity and I saw it. We don't have IMAX here in Brisbane anymore, unfortunately, but I saw it in 3D. And when it finished, I remember I was holding the chair and I was like, how long have I been gripping onto this chair for? Because it's just so immersive. I would love to see it in IMAX. It's incredible. I'd love to know then, just on the flip side of that, like obviously big movie moments and the experiences are so important, but then how have you viewed movies now from a director's point of view of the importance of having those more nuanced emotional moments? Because there's a few of those in Subservience that really, especially with the family dynamic of it all, you need to have those sort of quieter, more emotional moments. So I'm curious to know, how do you view those, and whether there's any experiences where you've sort of now noticed that more in the movies you watch.
Yeah, definitely. I think if anything, I notice I get excited by more positive and upbeat movies because I tend to write such dark material. So like something like Chef is like
Oh,
really like I just
yeah.
wish I could sit down and write a beautiful film like that. But I'm like, well, someone's got to die halfway through this. Who's it gonna be? But yeah, in terms of the nuanced scenes and everything, I think like I get really excited by a scene that has a lot of subtext. And we just actually had a premiere in Melbourne on Friday night for Subservience,
Yeah.
and it was the first time seeing it with 120 people in a cinema packed,
Wow.
and it was so exciting to see the subtext coming out in certain scenes, and seeing laughs where you want them to be laughs, because I knew there was going to be the gasps and the jump scares. I felt they were pretty strong in terms of the way they were, the sound design and visuals and
Sure.
everything like that. But the subtext, I feel like, is just like of a scene where it's just two people talking, but there's more happening, about
Mm.
the lasagna scene where she says, sorry, family secret.
Yep.
And Megan gives this like head tilt of a smile. And the audience and I was laughing behind the monitor when I first saw that. And I was like, please, again, that was great. Let's lean into that. And the whole way through the editing process, you don't know if that's going to land, and then finally on Friday night I got to see that moment land with an audience, and they laughed, and I was just like, great, all right, we're all on the same page here, this is awesome.
Oh, that would have been an incredible feeling. And but that's those little things, as they make up the whole of the film. And I think it just, as a film fan, I love seeing that stuff. I'd love to
And
ask as
just
well. Oh
I
yeah,
was just
please.
going to touch on that again, actually,
Yeah,
just
please.
to say, I think as in terms of the nuanced scenes and things that are kind of a little bit more slower, I think as a director, you really have to fight for those moments, because it's easy for producers to
Right.
worry about pacing and to worry about quickly moving to the next thing. And sometimes you've got to explain to them, or really voice your opinion of how letting that breath here and letting this scene just stretch out a little bit, letting it, we don't need as much dialogue and we can do it all by looks and all
Mm.
that. And then allowing that breath to, then when we pick up pace, then you feel that more and that intensity. And I think sometimes it's finding that balance. And we want to, you see it with a lot of films these days, they want to kind of hit the gas down and just,
Mm.
floor through it. And,
Sure.
and as much as I love a good fast paced film, and I
Mm.
do think that any film over 90 minutes has to earn every minute that you're there for. Like I'm a
For
big
sure.
believer in that. Not that I hate longer films, but I just think that the
No.
stakes and everything should kind of match the length.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and yeah, and I think sometimes you have to fight for that in the editing room, because it's easy for things to kind of hit the editing room floor.
Is there a scene in particular that you felt you had to fight for this movie that you're really glad ended up making it in?
One scene was, it was not necessarily a scene, but it was Monty having his own robot. Uh,
Oh. Oh. Wow.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
big thing that they wanted to cut out, because there was
Interesting.
kind of a note of like, well, if he hates robots, why would he have
Why would
one?
I
And
have
I
one?
was like,
Yeah.
well, that's the hypocrisy of it all. Like that's what I want. That's
Mm.
what I want to feel, is that you're kind of like, oh, he's just like everyone else. We all hate technology, but we all have smartphones. And even that guy that says I'll never get one, he's probably got one hiding under his pillow at home. So I really loved that element, and
Mm.
it was just a way to, I think, uh, show the world a little bit more, because we're kind of close in this family. So
Yeah.
any opportunity we got out there was just kind of exciting to see Megan up against another sim for a moment. But yeah, that was an interesting one, and I think it was
Yeah.
just they were worried it was going to confuse the audience that late in the game. I will say there was a scene that did hit the editing room floor that I loved,
Yeah.
which was the dinner outside. We saw the door open and we saw all the candles and
Everything's
everything.
set up.
And
Yeah.
we actually had a beautiful scene, and it was like so well performed. It was visually stunning. And there was just a few moments in there that were, Maggie was saying, well, Nick was telling Maggie, I think we should get rid of the sim now that you're home, and
Mhm.
her saying she didn't want, their children to lose any opportunities that other children that have sims, are going to have, whether it's learning a different language or helping out with study or whatever it is. Um, and it just didn't click right within that, where we were with the plot. That
Sure.
was the biggest issue, but it was a beautiful, slow, nice scene. And yeah, if we special features, I got to try and figure out a way to get them on that.
It's the tough part of being a director. It's the kill your darlings element of it. Hey, it's not
It
easy. I
is.
can imagine.
It is.
One thing I'd love to ask, and it's something that I noticed immediately from the first scene, is Jed Palmer's score, and the score in this film is absolutely incredible. I just want to know what that collaboration was like with Jed, and sort of not just coming up with the soundscape of the score, but how you kind of almost, as I guess cliche as it sounds, kind of make it a character of its own in the film.
Yeah, definitely. It was such an amazing experience working with Jed, first of all. And in fact, I remember when we had our first meeting, the day before we had our first meeting, my Spotify top five list came in,
Oh yeah,
and he
nice.
was on the top five list. And I was like, well, I've been listening to your scores as I'm prepping this movie. I might as well, it only seems fair to actually have you a part of this project. Um, so getting him on board, we actually got him fairly early, and we were discussing things, and I was really bringing him into the editing room very early on as we had rough cuts and stuff like that, just to give him an idea that to go home and, play with different elements. And we just kind of spoke about sounds and things, and I think his score is really what elevates us into that sci-fi world.
Mm,
Everything else is grounded, but that's the one element that I think I was kind of like, let's embrace the sci-fi
yeah.
style of it all. And it's interesting you say about characters, or the score feeling like a character, because we really did approach it in that way, and more specifically in a way that like each character would have their own kind of melody or
Yeah.
theme, motif that to go with it. And in fact, the first shot of Megan, we kind of hear this kind of thing as the camera pushes into her. And that was, I think, the first sound that we kind of really locked down, where it was like, okay, this is her. This makes sense. Let's go with that. And we took that and made it even darker as her character kind of goes on this downfall.
This is just a geeky question for me, but I'm just curious to know, how did you do the effect of the light in Megan's mouth when the other sim is walking around? How did you do that effect? It looked incredible.
Yeah, well, this it was, something that straight away the producers were like, visual effects, we'll get it done. And I was like, no, we've got to figure out a way to do this practically to some degree, at least at that point.
Yeah.
And I have to give it to my props master. He just nailed this LED with the battery, and I think she had to have this gel up on the roof of her mouth to actually kind of hold it up there, because we couldn't glue it, or we couldn't have it stick with on the teeth because it would be seen. So it was this LED kind of light strip that he made.
Wow.
And yeah, when we first saw it in there, I was just like so excited. And I think it was one of those things that actually got Megan really excited. That's these little sci-fi elements.
Mm.
But I don't think it tasted too good on the roof of her mouth, that gel. So yeah, it was kind of I felt sorry for her. I was like, let's get it over quickly. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think really, and again, from script onwards, it was one of those things that kept coming up. Do we need this? Do we need to do this? Is it necessary? And I really pushed it forward. I thought it was one of those elements that we kind of foreshadow in a fun way, and then
Yeah.
pay off later on. And then as we got to some visual effects that happen even further down the track, we kind of played with blue light without giving away too many spoilers.
Sure. No, I think I'm aware of. I think I know what you're saying. That
Yeah.
bit there. Because I had to ask, because it looked practical and it looks fantastic. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely it's paid off that for
It
that
was
visual
100%
aesthetic.
practical in the end. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so
Um,
good.
I'm trying to think if there was any sort of added. I think I was thinking about adding some lens flares to it, but then I think we tried it and it was like, no, as soon as you do that, it starts to look fake. And I was like, no, just keep it fully grounded.
There was something even more terrifying about having that sort of direct flashlight element when she is moving around and you've kind of got that direct pointed light. There is something actually quite creepy about that as well. I feel like the lens flare, I love a lens flare like every other guy, but I feel like that direct torch is really adds to the creepiness of that scene.
Good. I'm glad. I'm
I'll,
glad.
I'll close up. I'll close up on this one, Scott. And I was kind of thinking about sort of how AI, as I was watching the film, and how AI takes in information, and especially how Alice takes in information of she's got the internet there, and then sort of just breaks down what she sees and what she observes. I'm curious to know if there's a filmmaking sort of parallel in your time on sets, whether it's shorts or the feature films. What is something that you've learned about the craft that you just wouldn't have learned if you hadn't have seen it on a set? Something that's now just retained in your memory as something you will now continue to do on as a filmmaker.
I think just the politics of filmmaking and the politics of where
Interesting.
budget can go, I think that's a big element. And you really have to convey to the producers the vision you have to make sure whether it's, building a particular set or something like that. And one I would say, like, as an example, we shot most of the hospital stuff in a real hospital,
Oh wow.
except for the room. And
Right.
as we were breaking it down in terms of the schedule, I realized that we needed to build the hospital room on a set so we could change from day to night and all this, and we could really clump that scene together because it was going to be so hard to do those lighting changes on location. But it was something that they were kind of fighting against until they didn't want to spend that money, and then until you explain to them, by doing this, we're actually saving a day here by being able to put them all together. So I think it's just the politics of that. And sometimes I push too far with what I want, and they come back and they say, no, you can't blow up that building. And so I'm like, all right, well, let's blow up a car instead. So yeah, it's just filmmaking is um, it's a magic trick where you need 100 crew members to pull off every specific element in order for the trick to work. It's not solo. It's not it's not like music where you're a very small band, or any sort of other art form. It really is this uh, larger group that you're trying to uh, pull in one direction, because again, sci-fi, you can have so many different visions and elements,
Yeah.
and so many people's opinions of what it looks like and where it should go. And so I think early on storyboarding is really important. Whether we storyboarded the sex scenes, we storyboarded the action scenes, as even just dinner scenes. Storyboarding to convey the blocking, and as soon as you convey the blocking, you understand where the lighting should be, and then you understand how the set design should be. Everything, yeah, that's the big thing, because you can only have the movie in your head for so long before you have to start conveying it to dozens, if not hundreds, of crew members.
And I feel like the key word or the key takeaway from that is it's a magic trick, right? Like that's movies. Like it's just this huge magic trick, and when you pull it off, you get awesome shit on screen. And then I think that's what we get, man, with Subservience. Like as a movie fan, I just love the breaking it all down and watching it all stuff like this. So, dude,
Thank
Scott,
you.
thank you so much for your time, man. You've been super generous with your time this afternoon. I
No,
really
thank you for having
appreciate
me.
it.
This was great. I really enjoyed it, and I
I'm
really
glad.
loved looking at your film collection in the background.
I'm glad. I'm glad. If there's one thing that's worth looking at, mate, it's the movies behind me there. So I like I said, I appreciate it. I hope we get to do it again soon, and one day, man, you'll be recording that DVD commentary. I reckon we'll be having
Same
it
here,
in the
mate. Thanks,
collection.
mate. I really appreciate it.